Hey everyone, this is Keith McGinnis with KCDC Designs, and I am on location with Holly Smalley with Holly Smalley Customs, and we are going to show you how we did an on-site seam. So since this countertop is going to have an overhang, that column presented a problem. So that's our cutout. That's going to slip on the other side of the column, and then we took that piece we cut out, and we're going to piece that in, as you can see there, and we're going to do both of those seams. Here's the brace on the underside that will help stoke the flow of the quick coat as we seam together, and let's get started. So as we're getting our seams taped, what really works for me is, for one, when you put your tape beside the seam, I don't go right up to the seam. I go off to the side just a little bit, and I explain that a little later on in the video. But what I do is I put about 4 layers of tape on each side of that seam. What that allows me to do then when I put the quick coat and lay that quick coat in that seam is if I run a popsicle stick all the way across, I know I'm going to have a little bit of a buildup above the top of the countertop. The last thing I want is when the quick coat dries, I don't want it to dry below the surface, because if it dries below the surface, I'm going to have to add more quick coat. So for me, building up with 4 or 5 layers of tape allows me to smooth that over with my popsicle stick, and then once I pull the tape, then it's going to, that quick coat then is going to be above the surface of the countertop, and that way I know I'll be able to sand that down to the surface, opposed to taking a chance of it drying below. What I'm doing here is, as you saw earlier, the support piece we put underneath, just in case that was not sealed completely tightly, you want to do everything that you can to seal any possible area where that quick coat can find a way to leak out. And so what I'm doing underneath there with some silicone is I'm sealing up all of the seams, sealing up any chance that that could leak and that could drip and drip out onto the floor. Even though we're protecting the floor, of course, we just want to do what we can. And especially, this is a little bit different than a standard going across the countertop 25-inch seam. So just taking precautions is what we're doing to try to get that silicone and prevent that from leaking. So that's why I'm laying on my back with a tube of silicone. I am trying to seal up those cracks. So it's really not that necessary to let that silicone completely set up. It usually skims over in about 15-20 minutes or so. Anything to stop the quick coat from leaking. And now it appears that both of the seams are holding really well. So we're going to keep tending to these as it starts to thicken up a little bit. You can see here I'm removing some excess material, and the reason I'm doing that is because we have about 4 layers of tape built up, and so because of that, we don't have to leave a ridge to make sure that if the epoxy does sink down just a little bit as it starts to set up, that we have some buildup over the top of the actual seam. Now, when we put the tape down, we didn't put the tape down right at the edge of the seam. We actually pulled that back about a 32nd of an inch. It wasn't quite a 16th, a little bit less than that. Thing is, you don't want to put it right on the edge of the cut line, because that cut line is actually going to show. So if you pull that tape back just a little bit and then fill that with resin, and as you can see, this is actually holding really well. Holly, how about yours?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're holding really well, and if we were only using 1 layer of tape, then we would actually have a little bit of a buildup, a little bit of a ridge over the top of that. So we're going to keep an eye on that, and we still have some left in our cups. I'm going to grab one more of those. I'm going to call that a Jello shot cup, so I don't know what else you call them. And I'm going to put just a little bit at the very, very bottom of that cup, because that's going to stay more pliable longer. That's going to set up rather quickly because it's in a mass. So as this starts to set up, if we need to fill some in, especially if we need to fill some in these areas, that's plenty. If we need to fill some in these areas, that's really the most difficult part to me, is that corner. So the timing of when you pull the tape has to be just right. because at that corner is where, that's where it likes to be its thinnest point. So even when you pull the tape, as you feel that has set up quite a bit, it's still going to flow. So having a little bit in a cup, in a very shallow cup, it's still going to stay pliable, so you're still going to be able to add some to that to continue to build that up. So I'd rather have that built up a little bit more and sand it down than to have it below the ridge, and then you have no choice but to actually mix up more resin. And so right now these are both looking really good. Holly did a great job of taping the corner edges, and I don't know if you can see it, but on that edge right there, so the tape on the outside is, what do you call that, humped?
Pinched. So
Pinched.
it's just kind of so it just kind of comes out just slightly.
Enough to be able to allow kind of a channel of resin to go down there. You could leave that flat, but then when you pull that away, it's going to actually be below the cut line. So by pinching that and having a little bit of a hump there, that allows that little bit of a buildup there, just the same as we're getting the buildup here.
But you also want to make sure the sides of that hump on the outsides of it are nice and tight to your edge.
And that's a great point.
So that the epoxy doesn't come all the way out.
Yes, especially, and because this is one of the most beautiful rock edges that Holly did that I've ever seen, but that makes it even more of a trick of when you're pressing that tape down in there to make sure that you're getting that tape pressed into all the little cracks and crevices, because epoxy is going to find, just like water, least pass over resistance, and it's, as we can tell, it's going to flow about everywhere.
But it's holding now.
It's holding now. It's holding up really, really well. So this will be kind of a judge of keeping track of this to see when that starts setting up. When I pull the tape, I've needed to take a little bit of resin and fill in some of those areas. So that's the next tricky part, is when do you pull the tape? Obviously, if you pull it too soon, things are going to flow out, but you don't want to pull it too late. So if you get your timing just right, when you pull that tape, you are left with a little bit of a hard line here, but I've discovered if you get some isopropyl alcohol on your finger, once you've pulled the tape off, you can rub that back and forth and it really smooths that out nice, which is going to make the job of sanding that a lot better. I think we're getting pretty close to being able to pull the tape.
Yeah, I was going to say, because if we wait too long,
it's going to get stringy on us.
Yeah, and we want it to be somewhat pliable.
Here's another way to pull that down. See how that's not moving on us? I think it's pretty safe. How's yours doing over there? That still looks a little fluid.
Not really.
Can you scrape that? Or at least can you go along the sides just to get some of that off the sides? Because when you pull that, it could tear what's on the inside.
Yeah, see, it's pretty thick.
Okay, see how that is going in right there? I think that's still going to be okay. I can get just a little bit more in there. So again, wanting to time that just right, the epoxy is set up to the point to where we can start pulling the tape. And when I pull that tape from that seam, I want to pull that tape straight back. I don't want to pull it off at an angle in case that resin is still a little bit stringy. I'm just going to pull it straight back. And then once I get the tape pulled, then I'll be able to get a little bit of alcohol, 91% isopropyl alcohol on my finger, and very lightly go over the top of that seam just to kind of smooth out that ridge a little bit. You're really not going to feather out the resin that is over that seam, but it does help to smooth that out and make sanding a little bit easier. And anything we can do to make our job easier is all the better. So the side I'm working on, for some reason, set up a little bit faster than the side that Holly's working on, but she's getting to the point here pretty quick where she will be able to get the tape pulled. Where I pulled the tape over that front edge, and again, that being a rock edge, ended up leaving a little bit of resin that kind of snuck down in there. But what was really cool is I was able to use that isopropyl alcohol to rub that in or rub that out and get rid of that, and really turned out nice.
So can I have a little bit on my thumb and I'll kind of start pressing it into that. Oh, you
This
got
one
it.
here?
Yeah. No, you
This
got
is my seam.
it. I'm sorry.
You have your seam.
I'm sorry.
Your seam ain't setting up.
Fine.
No, you know, it's
No,
intentional
I'm
because that way, when we're filming this,
No,
we can do one seam at a time, and then, you know, then we can pan over to that one. Yeah, it just works out.
No, I was.
Holly was so much fun to work with. We really had a good time. I think our day started at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and I think it was 2 a.m. By the time we got out of there and got wrapped up. But we really did have a good time working together, and it made for a long day. So Holly's side has set up now, and so she's getting her tape pulled, and then she'll do the same thing with smoothing that over with some alcohol. Again, you know, just to make the job of sanding a little bit easier, clean up that front edge, and try to get that looking as good as we can. And then from that point, it is a waiting game of waiting for that resin to set up enough where we can get it sanded. So it was fairly warm in there, and we knew in a matter of 4 hours we'd be able to get it sanded down.
So see how along those ridges, because the tape stayed a little bit from the exact edge of that cut line, you don't see the cut line. The epoxy somewhat flows over the top of that just a little bit. So again, if we put that tape exactly right on that cut line, when you pull that off, even though you have filled that seam, you're still going to see a distinct line, which is your cut line. So that's why we run the tape offset just a little bit. And I take no credit in all of this because, you know, Rhonda taught us how to do this. So I'm just passing on
Thank you, Rhonda.
the news.
Mhm.
Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you,
Help me,
Rhonda.
Rhonda.
Thank
Help me,
you, Rhonda. Help me, Rhonda, yeah.
Teach me how to do a scene. I am not a singer. Don't put that on there. You gotta cut that out.
Okay, so that's all. Nothing more can happen. We're going to wait about 3 or 4 hours, and then we'll come back, sand that down, apply a UTC to the entire piece. So for now, we're out. Everyone.
For you to help us, Rhonda. Help us.
Do, 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 do.
Help me, Rhonda.
All right, we'll be back.
Okay, we've pulled our tape, we've run over it with a little bit of alcohol on our fingers, and now we're just going to wait about 3 or 4 hours till we come back and sand.
Okay, so it's been about 4 hours, and the quick coat has set up and ready to be sanded. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to get both of these seams sanded. The rest of the countertop has already been prepped for ultimate top coat, and we're going to go with the natural finish. And so as soon as those are sanded down, we're going to get everything prepped, cleaned up, and the ultimate top coat applied. So Miss Holly is going to start sanding away.
Holly's now sanding with 220, and you want to be careful not to concentrate your sander just on that seam. Be sure and sand across the surface and make sure you get that feathered out so you don't leave a little bit of an impression or an indentation.
Okay, so we have our seam sanded down, smooth as a spank baby's butt. And now we're ready to apply the UTC.
So after visiting with Rhonda, because the quick coat has no UV inhibitors, that's just another good reason to faux paint if you're using white or light colors, to faux paint over the top of that seam, not only to match the colors of your countertop, but also to mask any ambering that's going to take place because of using the quick coat to fill that seam.
Right? And so what the spray paint's going to do is kind of lock those colors down, so when we're rolling the ultimate top coat over the top, it doesn't pick up those spray paints and end up rolling it across the surface. So
So after a long day, and
dark and
currently
you
at that
can't see
point
what
it's a
she's
little bit
doing, I'll
after
just tell you
midnight,
she's doing
we
a
have applied
fabulous
the
job and it
ultimate
looks
top coat and
fantastic.
the natural finish. Went on flawlessly, as you can tell by the smile on Holly's face. This was a project that turned out really, really well. So I hope this has helped. If you have any questions, please leave some notes in the comment. Once again, this is Keith McGinnis with KCDC Designs on location with Holly Smalley from Holly Smalley Customs. Great job, Holly.